Good morning, folks. Before Amy gets started, I thought I'd kind of review just a little bit what we had covered last week, and then Amy is going to do a lesson on the whole issue of Mary Magdalene and was Jesus married and all of that. So delighted to have all of you back. Any new folks who are coming in, great having you as well. We hope that you'll be able to follow along. That when we did this, we decided that we wouldn't, require anybody. You got to be here for the first one and the second one. I think each one stands alone, and we'll try to deal with the many questions that we brought up last week, and try our best. If there's something that we haven't covered, or you're not going to be able to be here next week and just want to know, please come up and ask us, and we'll talk about it. And if we don't have something prepared or don't know right there, we'll research it and come back to you. Now, last week we were talking about the Council of Nicaea and the things that were said. Amy, I'm going to give you this because I'm going to put my notes in yours, and that's going to make it a problem. Okay, thanks. The things that we talked about were that the Council of Nicaea, as Dan Brown's book was trying to say, the Council of Nicaea did not create the list of books that would be put into Scripture. That was not the purpose of the Council of Nicaea. It was brought together, all these bishops were brought together to talk about the nature of Jesus' divinity. And we talked about the Arian controversy over against the Orthodox side. And how divine was Jesus? Were Jesus and God just really, really, really close, and then there was humanity? Or was there God up here that was fully divine, and then Jesus was born as a human, and that really he was more human than divine? That was the issues that was really being dealt with, and the Orthodox side is what won out. So that's what we have in the Nicene Creed. We also talked last week about the fact that there were many Gospels that were written, but not as many as Dan Brown says in his book. He says there were 80 Gospels that were floating around the early Christian years, and really there were probably only about 12 to 14 Gospels, and we talked about what was a Gospel. If it was really about the life of Jesus and with lots of details about the life of Jesus, then really the four that we have in the Bible today, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are the ones that fit that bill. The others were really more sayings that supposedly Jesus said, or at least sayings that were given to Jesus' mouth. And they were called many things. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Philip. Those writings were around out there and often called Gnostic teachings. We talked about that a little bit, about the secret teachings from the Gnostic community that was there. We talked about Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, who did not collate the Bible. That was not his job. He did have 50 Bibles ordered to be printed, but he didn't put all the books together and collate and say these are the ones that are going to go in. That's not how that happened. That was done by other councils and other bishops that was going to happen during the ensuing years throughout that early Christian era. So those are the things that we talked about, and several other things as well, but the basics. And today, Amy's going to come talk about Mary Magdalene, the issue of being married to Jesus and all that. So are there any questions before we start off? Anything that, yes, please. Yeah, the Gospel of Judas is what she's asking about. Forgive me. And often Gospels are given to a particular person, the Gospel of Judas. So you have the idea that Judas may have, said some things that got written down. It's attributed to him. Probably that's not the case. Just like the Gospel or just like in First Peter in the Bible, Peter probably didn't write that writing, but it's attributed to him to give it more authority. Gospel of Judas. I have not read a lot on Judas at all. I haven't read that particular gospel at all. I can't really speak to that very much. And so it was one of the writings going on out there. It's one of the ones that was discovered in the Nag Hammadi. When I say that, Nag Hammadi, the Dead Sea Scrolls, when we say that, discovered in about 1945, we knew that a lot of these Gospels were going around out there, and when that discovery was made back in the 40s, we knew that some of these other Gospels, like Judas, Mary Magdalene, there were fragments of these that were in that find, and they are still being uncovered. And this one Gospel of Judas is being uncovered. We've had a lot of things known in the scholarship world, but a lot hasn't been brought out until just recently, really in the last several years. And more writings are coming out, and the latest one seems to have been Gospel of Judas. So I can't say a lot to that, but I'll have to look that up and talk more with you about it later. I don't want to take too many questions because I want to give a lot of time to you. So I'm going to stop at this point, and then let's hear from Amy.
Okay. Am I on? I'm on. All right. Well, I would like to ask Bill to come back and help me hold the picture. First, I want to talk about the actual painting of the Last Supper, which was painted by... Oh, yeah. Okay. See, you do know a lot about this already. It's painted on the wall of a refectory, otherwise known as a cafeteria, in a convent. Actually, I'm not sure if it's a convent or a monastery. I don't know if it's men or women that live there. But a house of a holy order in Milan, Italy. So if you want to go see the painting, you don't go to a museum to see it. You go to the cafeteria of this place to go see it. And it's not available for purchase because you'd have to knock down the wall and take the wall home with you. But somebody asked a question in this group last week. Oh, and I wish I had a pointer. Well, I guess I'll just use this little stubby pointer. Here I have one. Anyway, somebody said, is there really a woman in this painting? And if so, is it Mary Magdalene? Well, that's a big question because Dan Brown alleges in a scene with Lee Teabing, who is the British historical authority in the story. And by the way, one reviewer of the book says that Teabing is a play on the word teabag because the guy's British. So I don't know if that's really what Dan Brown was thinking or not. Anyway, Mr. Teabag, and in the movie, he's on elbow crutches and he hobbles over and says, "Check it out." Dun dun dun. Okay. That's not much of a woman if you ask me. I mean, I don't see her appearing on the cover of Cosmo or anything like that. Also, if that's a woman, and I think we cut off part of it, but anyway, if that's a woman, then that leaves room for only 11 other people, and we know there were 12 disciples at the Last Supper. So where was that other guy? Did he have to go out and get napkins or something that they forgot? Or I left the rolls. I was making the rolls at home and I forgot to bring them. Or we need another bottle of pop. So if that's a woman, we got to know that one of the guys is running around somewhere else. Dan Brown says, and this was taken off the internet and blown up, and when you do that, it gets kind of pixelated, and you see those little squares. If Bill had actually gone to Milan and just ripped the wall out and brought it here for us to look at, we could see it a little better. But Dan Brown alleges that she has breasts. Well, if she does, they're not much to write home about. That's a pretty flat-chested person, but the features are allegedly softer, and the hair is long, and the position of the person's head is kind of calm and nurturing and kind and feminine and all that kind of thing. Well, most authorities, most art historians are looking at this and saying, no, it's not a woman. The softness, maybe the roundness of the body, the lack of wrinkles, the lack of gray hair, just means that this is a young person. This is John. This is probably the youngest one of the group. And I don't think Leonardo da Vinci intended for him to look as though he had breasts. I don't think the hair is supposed to be necessarily feminine. Besides, if it were a woman, she would probably have had her head covered. So most noted authorities are saying this is not a woman, this is a man. This is not Mary Magdalene in the painting. Okay, thank you, Bill. What else was I going to say about that? No, Bill, would you come back?
Yes.
Or I can hold it if you want to.
Well, I just got to. Yes.
Okay. I went to the Tulsa Town Hall presentation on this with Dr. Andrew Stangl. Did anybody else hear that? Okay. I didn't go with him. I just went, and he was there, and he was speaking. And he's gone all over the place giving lectures about art history and all kinds of things. And he's an authority on Leonardo da Vinci. So he's real popular right now because people want to say, what about the Da Vinci Code? And what do you know about this, Dr. Stangl? Well, Dan Brown talks about how this guy is making a gesture with his hand like this. And that is, in the conspiracy theory, it's symbolizing that that this is really Mary Magdalene. She's cut off from history. And her importance is cut out because we want to cover up this thing that she and Jesus were married. This is Judas here with the darker hair. He is, if you could see it, he's clutching a bag of coins, which he got in return for betraying Jesus. And so the theory is that, okay, you're being cut out, and that very horizontal hand makes a clear slice. He also talks about how this is just like fun with paint by number. The more you think about it, this figure, this shape right here, kind of looks like a funnel or the bottom of a goblet, and this is Mary and this is Jesus. This is a symbol for the divine feminine. It's supposed to look like a womb, a woman's womb in between here, and that's a secret symbol that the two of them were married and they had a child, and this symbolizes the womb. Well, Dr. Stangl said, no, it's just the fact that they're kind of leaning away from each other and we happen to have a triangle, which happens when one person has their arm like this and the other person has their arm like this. This is Peter. This is Peter, and Dr. Stangl was saying that the importance of Peter here, sticking his hand in, is kind of that he is tempering the extreme bad, the extreme evil of Judas with the extreme good of John, the disciple whom Jesus loved. And he's the rock, Peter is the rock on which Jesus built his church and all that. So he's kind of coming in and bridging the tension between that very dark and that very light. Okay, I think that's about all I have to say about that painting. But that whole, if you've seen the movie, you've seen them go into detail about this inverted triangle, and so the triangle going this way is woman, the triangle going this way is man. And I won't say too much about that in case you haven't seen the end of the movie or read the end of the book. So, the M? Oh, right. I guess what they're saying is that this is like an M going this way, which would symbolize either marriage or Mary Magdalene. Oh man, now that's really getting creative, I think. So, but they do bring that out, that there's an M in there. I think he did. She was saying that Da Vinci himself had identified that this really was John. He never wrote down and said, this is Mary Magdalene. And actually, I have to use my cheat sheet, but we've got, we cut off, okay, there's Bartholomew, just got a little side of his head. One of the Jameses, Andrew here, what did I say? Judas, Peter, and John. Jesus, obviously, we can figure that one out. Thomas, the other James, Philip, and then Matthew, Thaddeus, and Simon got cut off. So, but that was, as far as art historians know, those are the guys in the painting, and they are all guys. So, thank you, Bill. Oh, she asked about the reverse of colors. And I think that's another thing that's just making too much of something. And you're meaning that, sorry.
My arm is getting tired.
Okay.
Right.
That he's got red and blue, and then she has red and blue here. Red tunic, blue cloak, blue tunic, red cloak. Woo. Well, they didn't have, thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
They didn't have the variety of colors of clothing in that time, for one thing. Now, here in the United States of America in 2006, you can walk into any store and buy any color shirt you want, any color pants. Even if they don't match, you can buy them together and wear them together, and that's fine. But in these days, you had dyes that came from other countries or dyes you might have produced at home, and you might have just red dye and blue dye and, I don't know, green dye, but you didn't have the variety of colors that were available. So who knows what he was intending with those colors? It could have just been that he had a lot of red on hand and he wanted to use it. So that's what I think about that. Thinking of another couple of things that Dr. Stangl said. Oh, John is depicted as clean shaven. That's another emphasis of his youth. He wasn't quite old enough to grow a big, heavy beard. Okay. All right, that's what I want to say about the painting. Mm-hmm. Right. And that was definitely... Right. Most people did have long hair. They hadn't invented barbers at that time in history. I guess they had, but the style was to wear your hair long. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Sometime when Leonardo da Vinci was alive. Does anyone know what year The Last Supper was painted? At least, what are the dates of Da Vinci's life? I'm looking at someone who has a great knowledge of art history. Well, he was the original Renaissance man, and when was the Renaissance? 1400s, 1500s. How's that sound? It started earlier. Do we hear 1300s? He was a contemporary of Michelangelo. So, he was not running around with James and John and Bartholomew. Anyway, is that what you were kind of getting at? It's all wrapped up in this idea that Da Vinci was a member of the secret society that had carried the secret for many centuries. So that was the deal. Well, let's switch gears and talk about something I know a little bit more about. I knew somebody would ask me a question I didn't know the answer to, but we figured it out, didn't we? All right. Who was Mary Magdalene? Well, Mary was one of many, many Marys in the New Testament. And you think, well, why didn't they think of some other names for people? Well, people were just, I guess it was sort of like the dyes. They didn't have that many names. How many Amy's did we have in my Sunday school class? When I was in 5th grade, we had 5 Amy's in my Sunday school class. So little girls who were born in the early 70s, a lot of us were named Amy and Tiffany and Tracy and Jennifer. And a lot of women that were born in my grandmother's era were named Lucille and Mildred and names like that. So you have names that are popular. Actually, Jesus was a very popular name in the time that the person we know as Jesus lived. It's the name that we would call Joshua, actually. Our name Joshua comes directly from the word Jesus. It's an anglicization of the word Jesus. So if your name is Josh, your name really is Jesus. So congratulations. Anyway, we have names that are popular. So in our New Testament, we just happen to have a lot of women who are named Mary. But the problem with that is we get confused. And we think, is this the same Mary that was wiping Jesus' feet with her hair? And is that the same Mary that was the sister of Martha and the sister of Lazarus? And then what about this woman at the well? Did you ever see the movie The Greatest Story Ever Told? Okay. That was before the time of some people in this congregation. But I think there's one woman in the whole movie, and she does everything bad. She sins all kinds of ways. She's the woman at the well. She's the woman with the hair. And she calls herself Mary Magdalene. It's just kind of like, well, here's this bad person we have. Let's just make her responsible for everything. And she is Mary Magdalene. And unfortunately, I think that's how a lot of people who have grown up reading the New Testament have chosen to see Mary Magdalene, that she is all those people rolled into one. She's just kind of the sinner in the New Testament, and she ran around with Jesus a whole lot. Well, Mary Magdalene was from a town called Magdala, Magdala. That's a town of about 3,000 people at the time. It's a small fishing village on the coast of the Sea of Galilee. She's from the same area as the Apostle John, we think. She didn't have a surname. She didn't have a family name, which most people didn't have back then. But she was called Magdalene because she was from Magdala. Sort of like Leonardo didn't really have a last name, but he was from Vinci, so they called him Leonardo da Vinci. He wasn't the son of Mr. and Mrs. da Vinci. He was probably the son of Guido and Natalia or something. But anyway, they didn't have last names. She's listed in the Bible as having 7 demons. That's Luke chapter 8. So it's possible that she was wandering around by herself because her family didn't know what to do with her. This was someone who was severely mentally ill. There were no facilities for people like that. And she most likely would not be a good prospect for marriage if she had all these emotional, mental problems. So what's a family to do with a woman they can't marry off? Well, lock the door behind her and hope she finds her way someplace. So that's one theory. Okay. Marjorie Proctor Smith, who is a feminist theologian and was one of my professors in seminary, writes that Mary Magdalene is the preeminent woman disciple, and she really is the woman that is mentioned more often than any other in Jesus' ministry. In John and Mark, she's the first person Jesus reveals himself to. She was very useful to Jesus' ministry, and that's one thing that Bruce Chilton says in his book. This is a fairly new book. It's about a year old. And it's gained a lot of popularity because of the Da Vinci Code. It's quite simply called Mary Magdalene, a Biography, and it's by Bruce Chilton, who is a professor of theological studies at Bard College in upstate New York. So I think this is about a $20 book. It's in hardback. I don't think it's in paperback. But it talks about all kinds of really good stuff, the theories that are true, the theories that are not true. And he very much debunks the idea that Mary was married to Jesus, that they had a child, that she came to France in a boat, and that she's the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of Princess Diana, which is another theory that's going around. But Diana was from the line of the Merovingian kings, and so Princess Diana was proof that Jesus and Mary Magdalene really had a baby. And Princess Diana was killed because she was about to marry a Muslim, Dodi al-Fayed, and they didn't want the great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter of Jesus to go doing something like that. So have you heard that theory? Okay, that's one I heard. I heard it on TV, so it must be true.
You can buy it. You can buy it in your grocery store here tomorrow. It'll be National Enquirer. Pick up.
It's next to the Tic Tacs and the phone card. Okay, she is the only follower of Jesus that is named as a provider. Luke 8:3 lists her as a provider. So that leads us to believe it's possible she had money. Maybe she was a woman who had some kind of business. And there wasn't much for women to do in the New Testament times, so a lot of people have said, oh, she had money, she had a business, she was a prostitute. Well, not necessarily. Lydia in the New Testament had a business. She wasn't a prostitute. She was a seller of purple dyes and cloth. So Lydia escaped all this bad press as she had money and stuff. And my great aunt was named for her. So, but I don't have any great aunts named Mary Magdalene. How does that work out? Okay, maybe she provided Jesus with support. Maybe she provided him with defense against naysayers. Maybe she was an excellent cook and she provided him with food and rest. I don't know. Most scholars agree that she was not the woman who anointed Jesus' feet with her hair and the expensive oil that we call nard. You remember that because it sounds like lard. So if you had, and again, what's the deal with the feet? Well, a lot of us walk around these days in the summertime in Tevas or Birkenstocks or flip-flops, and our feet get dirty, but we can go wash them off in the shower, and then we probably get in the car and drive from place to place. But these people wore sandals all the time. They didn't wear socks. They were totally pedestrian. They didn't generally ride on animals or get into cars. So the hospitable thing to do when someone came to your house, today we'd probably say, would you like something to drink, or may I take your coat, or would you like to have a seat? The first question a person would ask you in those times would be, may I wash your feet? Or here's a place where you can wash your feet. Because you come into a house and you think, my feet are coated with dirt and grime and whatever other nasty stuff you would find in the road as you're walking along. So this was a great sign of hospitality for this woman to wash Jesus' feet and dry them with her hair. Okay. I want to skip around a little bit. At the end of Luke, the 7th chapter of Luke, we get confused because we're talking about the woman with the oil and the hair, and then we go right into a story about Mary Magdalene. And it's hard to figure out the antecedent, the noun, the proper noun that the pronouns are referring to, because we just hear, oh, it's a woman with hair and she's a sinner and all this kind of stuff. It's different people. It's different people. Okay, other Marys we have are Mary of Bethany, the sister of Martha and Lazarus, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and then there were the unnamed women, the woman with the hair and the nard, the Samaritan woman at the well, and then the adulteress that the Pharisees want to stone. And in that movie, The Greatest Story Ever Told, we got the woman at the well and the adulteress that the people wanted to stone, and she stands up and says, I'm Mary Magdalene. And we in the audience say, no, you're not. You're three different people. The Gospel of Philip is one of those Gospels that is not in our Bible. We call it an apocryphal book, and it's grouped in with the Gospel of Mary, which we've heard a whole lot about, as well as the Wisdom of Jesus Christ and the Secret Book of John. Have you ever heard of those? We feel like we've got the wisdom of Jesus Christ in the Bible. That's probably all we need. But in that Nag Hammadi discovery, there was Nag Hammadi 1 and Nag Hammadi 2. And Bill mentioned, you gave them some really great word. Was this the word you said last week? And you said you can impress your friends at your next party? Okay. Well, hopefully you get invited to 2 parties. So you can say, hey, how about that Nag Hammadi stuff? Nag Hammadi. And we had one group of writings, and then they found another one, which we call them Nag Hammadi 1 and 2. So in Nag Hammadi 2, we've got the Gospel of Mary, the Wisdom of Jesus Christ, and the Secret Book of John. These were found in 1896 when somebody purchased the text for an Egyptian museum, the Egyptian Museum in Berlin. So you go to Berlin and see all these Egyptian artifacts. All these books deal with the risen Jesus, things that happened after the crucifixion. The Gospel of Mary is the first work in the group, but the problem with the Gospel of Mary, as they found it, is that it's missing the first 6 pages and a few of the pages in the middle. So we tend to read things like that and just make up the part we don't have because we don't have it and we want it to be a certain way. And they've never found those missing pages. I'm having fun putting 2 words together at once and creating my own language, and thank you for following me along with that. In the Gospel of Mary, Jesus asked his follower, would you come back and just hold the picture?
Just stop. Take a deep breath.
Okay.
And start.
The Gospel of Mary. Jesus asks his followers to spread the good news about the kingdom. And everybody in the story says, I'm afraid to go out and spread the good news. We're the early Christians, and they're going to persecute us. And we just lost Judas over here. He went and lay down in a field and exploded, and people are hanging themselves, and things are not going very well for this core group of disciples, and we're frankly very afraid to go spread the good news. But Mary Magdalene stands up and says, you guys are so lame. Let's go. Let's do it. So she's kind of Jesus' cheerleader. She's the yeehaw person. We can do this. We might get killed, but we're going to go out and spread the good news. And Peter and Andrew rebuke her and say, who do you think you are, woman? But then Levi steps in and defends her. And he went on to have that blue jeans empire. So he was a really great guy. He was very open-minded about women. Okay, Mary Magdalene appears as an enlightened member of Jesus' circle of disciples in these writings. The Gospel of Philip, which is another one that was discovered later, refers to Jesus kissing Mary Magdalene on the mouth, but most doubt it referred to a sexual relationship. The Da Vinci Code book gets into this about, Jesus kissed Mary Magdalene, and so that means something. It sounds like a fifth grade conversation. Did you hear that so-and-so kissed so-and-so? Kissing was very big in the Middle East, and actually those of you who have traveled outside the United States have probably found that kissing is still big in places other than the United States. I guess it is big here, but it has connotations here that it doesn't have in other parts of the world. I went to France when I was 17 for a month, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have never kissed so many people in a 4-week period. This is so weird. But nobody wanted to hug. Hugging was quite taboo over there if it was not your child or your spouse or your very special friend or something. Would you stand up and have me demonstrate something? Okay. I want you to give me a hug. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. Okay. Look how much we're touching.
That's right.
Ooh. Our whole bodies are touching when we hug. And when all of you, we can see you out there hugging other people. You touch your whole body, and at least for the French, that's like, whoa, that is way too much contact. But if you, hi, Bill.
Hi, Amy.
Do like that, and where I lived, we kissed 4 times. I just thought, oh my gosh, you walk into a room and you have to greet everybody and kiss everybody 4 times. It take an hour. But you can do that, and nothing on our bodies is touching except our cheeks. And they don't really even kiss the cheek. It's just like a cheek thing. Thank you. I didn't tell you I was going to do that. Sorry about that.
That's right.
So, to kiss someone on the mouth was just not a big deal over there. Not a big deal in that time period. And there's one author that said the kiss between Christians was a gesture of trust and intimacy, and also when you seize right hands, that's your fighting hand, so you can't get to your sword. So when you shake hands, it's a gesture of peace. And I can't find where I wrote this down, but it's kind of, if I kiss you, even if I kiss you on the lips, it's transferring the Spirit of God from my being to yours. So that's another theory about why Jesus and Mary kissed. Okay. Now, Mary was one of the first people to come to the tomb, and what was she doing there? Was she Jesus' lover, and that's why she wanted to be the one to be there to anoint his body and to weep and wail at the outside of the tomb? Well, she was there because it was a woman's job to do the anointing. These days, we take a body to the funeral home, and the funeral home does the embalming and all of that stuff. They didn't have funeral homes back then, so usually the women in the family would go and prepare the body for burial. So she was there to do that. Also, one theory says that she was better able to go and be around the body and be around the tomb. There was less of a chance that she would get arrested or killed for running around with Jesus than if one of the men had gone. And the men were probably more highly visible. as being followers of Jesus than the women were, because women were just kind of invisible back then. Oh, it's a woman, we're not paying attention to her. So that doesn't mean that she had special relationships with Jesus. The Gospel of Phyllis, that's a early feminist writing. The Gospel of Philip refers to Mary Magdalene as Jesus' companion. And this is a word Dr. Biggs loves to talk about and take apart. Okay. Your companion. Well, today, if we read an obituary about someone and they list all the relatives and then they say, and faithful companion, Marie, we kind of think, okay, Marie must have been a special friend, girlfriend, that kind of relationship. But the com prefix on a word means with, from the Latin root, and pan, bread, right, with bread. So your companion is the person you break bread with. And in those times, if you ate with somebody, that meant something very significant. You were laying down your arms to sit at the table with this person and share bread with them. And that was also an act of trust and peace. We are together, we're going to break bread together. So I am your friend forever, basically. And that's kind of weird for us because we go to Arby's and sit with strangers and we're not laying down our lives for those people. We just got a table next to them and we're hungry and we want to eat. But in those days, if you sat at a table with someone, it had high significance. Okay. Mm-hmm. It sure has. Debbie's saying that when the Last Supper was originally printed, I don't know if you all could hear her down here, what we all learned in school and what our art historians are saying is this was about the betrayal. This painting was depicting this betrayal that was about to happen. You've got Judas and he's shadowy and his hair is dark and he's got the bag of money. It wasn't about the woman that didn't really look like a woman but sort of kind of did. Yeah, and you're right, it has gotten blown way out of proportion. It is. Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question. Most people in this area of the world at this time were illiterate. In fact, we believe that Jesus was most likely illiterate. Where would he have learned to read and write? I mean, who was teaching reading and writing at that time? Right. It could have been, that's a great question. It could have been something that he learned through the tradition and the ritual and all of that stuff. But as far as Jesus sitting down with a pad and pencil and writing a bunch of stuff, he didn't do that. And there's no writing called the gospel according to Jesus. There's the wisdom of Jesus. But all the things that we have in our Bible were passed down for at least 2 generations orally. Oral tradition, and these are the stories that we know are true, the stories that happened, and it took at least 60 to 75 years for them to make it onto paper by a few literate people who wrote them down. So you bring up a very good point. People were not just typing it into their iPods right as it happened, or calling it back to the secretary and having her dictate it, or dictating it to the secretary. So, yeah, you've got a big lag time in there of nothing being written down. And then finally, 60, 75, 100 years later, it is written down. Okay. Bruce Chilton, in this book that I held up, spends a lot of time talking about Mary and her anointing. And if you want to buy this and find out about her relationship with Jesus, there's not that much on that. But he really celebrates her as an anointer and as a person who helps Jesus learn about people with demons, because she was listed in the Bible as having had 7 demons. We would probably say today that she had mental illness. I don't know many people that walk around saying, well, my aunt has a demon. You'd say, my aunt has some mental illness that she's being treated for. But back then, that's what they believed was going on. So she had a lot of demons. She had a lot of problems. And her coming to Jesus was kind of a learning experience for Jesus about how do I deal with this and how do I heal this person. He had healed all kinds of different physical ailments, but here are emotional and spiritual ailments that he needs to work on. And of course, if he was divine and he was truly God and truly man all at the same time, he already knew, but he was practicing on her. Okay. Chilton also hypothesizes that Mary Magdalene may have been someone whose paternity was in doubt, and that's why she was wandering around by herself, coming from a town that was probably 15 to 20 miles away from where Jesus was doing his thing. If you were a woman back in that time, your identity was shaped by either your father or your husband or your son. If you didn't have any male relatives, you were really as good as dead. You had to find a way to survive on your own, which is why there was some prostitution. I guess there's always been prostitution, but a lot of women who had no other means of support turned to that, unfortunately. And then you had a few people like Lydia and others who developed a trade where they could sell things. But if you didn't know who your father was, you would be greatly shunned by the society. And so she may have just been wandering around looking for a family, looking for a place to fit in. And that's one of his theories. She would have been a bad prospect for marriage. You didn't want your son to marry a woman who didn't know who her father was, because lineage was very important. Family was very important. Now, let's talk about Gregory the Great and what he did to confuse all of us. Gregory the Great was the Pope around 591. I know that date. And he, in one sermon series, kind of amalgamated all the sinful women in the Bible into one person. And because of him, we've all been walking around for a long time saying, Mary is the woman with the hair, and Mary is the prostitute, and Mary is the woman at the well, and Mary is the woman who was going to be stoned. Let's see. Oh, his quote is, he says that her 7 demons represented the 7 vices. So she was just a big, major sinner and turned her life around and came to Jesus, and he changed everything for her. So that's really where that idea got cemented. In 1209, when the Crusades were going on, Crusaders were dispatched by the Pope, and they torched the town of Béziers in France, B-E-Z-I-E-R-S. They killed 15,000 people approximately in one day because they had heard that there was a heretical teaching going on that Jesus and Mary Magdalene had had sexual relations. So they decided to go to the town and let's squelch that rumor just by killing the whole town, instead of, sitting down and talking about it and saying, don't say that anymore. So they wiped out the town, and none of you is a descendant of the people of Béziers because there are no people left there anymore. Okay, any questions so far about what I've said? Debbie? Mm-hmm. Right, you're a single woman, we don't understand you, you must be a prostitute. Any other questions? I don't know. That could totally be true. That Da Vinci was not eager to make this painting. He just kind of... Well, it was all work for him, and we're not always excited about doing our work. Plus, it was one he couldn't take home with him. He had to leave it on the wall in the cafeteria. Yes? In the Bible, as far as like who was sitting where and all that kind of thing, well, we know they weren't all sitting on one side of the table. I've always laughed about that. I didn't come up with that joke. That's from the show Nonsense. Usually when you have people over, you don't all sit on the same side of the table. Have you ever, on Sunday nights, watched the British comedies on Channel 11? Are You Being Served? Okay. Woohoo! We like that show down here. Touchdown. They have these scenes in the break room on that show where they're drinking coffee and having a piece of pie and talking about the workplace gossip and all this stuff. It's a show about a department store, and it's the people who work at the department store who are having all these little intrigues with each other. And whenever they have a scene in the break room, they're all sitting on one side of the table. And how many of you do that at your work? You go into the break room and say, ooh, let's all sit on the north side of the table and talk about that. Then you get all the way around the table. But we got to think about the camera. So if someone is painting a painting, I guess unless you're doing it from looking down or doing it where they'd be all around the table, but they'd have their heads turned like that so you could see who it was, you'd have to put them all on the one side of the table to depict how it really looked. But there's no mention in the Bible about so-and-so was sitting here, and we're not sure exactly where the room was. It was a set-apart room that was in a safe place. So, but there's not that much detail about it. And it doesn't say, and Judas was sitting there with a big bag or any of that kind of thing. Yes? I believe that's a fabrication of the book. That the Mona Lisa, I'm trying to remember what they said about it in the book. It was, she represented androgyny and the possibility of being male or female and this kind of thing. But I don't think there's much to that. Nobody really knows much about the Mona Lisa. And with all of these paintings, it's hard to know much about them because we didn't have Katie Couric there interviewing Leonardo. Now, why did you paint this? And even if you do get interviewed by some TV person, do you always tell them the whole story? And if you're an artist, you create art for art's sake, and it means all kinds of different things to other people. It means something different to everybody here. The mosaic in our hallway, either one of them, we could all look at that and come up with about 300 different interpretations of what exactly it means for us. So that's one of the problems with this book, that this author is saying, this painting was painted this way, and it means this because there's this. Well, go to any museum, like I said, you put 20 people in front of a painting, you're going to have 20 different interpretations of what's going on in the painting. Right. If you didn't hear that, she's saying that most artists at the time were commissioned by the church or a king or somebody to do the paintings that they did. We know that Leonardo went and made all these wacky inventions on his own time. Like he invented a helicopter, and I don't think he ever really built it, but he did all kinds of, what? A tank, way ahead of his time. All kinds of wacky stuff that we wouldn't think he would have thought of in the time that he lived. But a lot of the religious paintings that you see in museums or on the walls of churches or in the cafeteria were commissioned by the Pope or some church official because they wanted a visual depiction of the story of the Bible. Plus, as we said, literacy is kind of a new fad in the world. We haven't been very literate on this globe for a long time. So old churches that you go and visit are going to have lots of paintings, lots of statuary, and your older stained glass windows have scenes from the Bible because the folks that would go to church couldn't read a word, but they could sure understand a picture of two figures in the window. So, if Leonardo were commissioned to paint a painting of the Last Supper, why would he fool around with it and mess it up? Unless he were very brave and was really, really dedicated to this conspiracy theory. Yes. It does. Yeah, for crusaders to just haul off and kill 15,000 people, that does mean that there is a sensitivity there. So, let's hope nobody does that ever again.
Question in the back.
Pam? She's talking about the famous movie, The Agony and the Ecstasy. Was it Richard Burton? Okay. Charlton Heston, who was a contemporary of Richard Burton.
That's right.
And Charlton Heston went to Northwestern University. Go Wildcats. Okay. And he was Moses.
Yeah.
So we like him. Pam was saying that the movie, The Agony and the Ecstasy, is a great depiction of what the politics of art in that time period were. And it was ecstatic and agonizing all at the same time. You've got this wealthy person who wants you to paint something, but you want to paint something else, and you're poor and desperate until somebody comes along and says, hey, paint something for me. I'm finding that a lot in my research, that there was an effort to downplay the role of women, and that Jesus was really more pro-female than most of his followers were at the time. But Jesus was not, his attitude toward women was not typical of the times, because women were basically nothing. They were property, they were chattel. So he was kind of revolutionary with the way he treated all these women in his inner circle. And I think, unfortunately, it was only natural for early church people to say, well, this is kind of wacky. Let's not do that. Let's not let these women get the power. But as far as how deep the conspiracy is and how hard they really work to make that happen, I can't really say. But that is one strong theory, that they made Mary Magdalene appear to be a prostitute and a big sinner instead of an early church mother and a worker in the church, to downplay the significance of the women. Eamon? Well, the first question I'm going to let Bill answer next week, or right now?
Next week you'll have to come back because the priority of Sion we'll deal with next week. Okay. What's the second question?
What is my personal opinion on the book? Is it worth reading? And is it so blasphemous that your head will explode? Is that what you said?
What's your answer?
My answer is, well, I told those of you who were here last week, I started reading it and I got this horrible stomach virus. So for about a year, I couldn't pick it up because it reminded me of being sick. And then when this Andrew Stangl guy was coming to town, I thought, oh, I've got to finish reading it. And then I got really into it and thought, this is a page turner. This is really exciting. And I almost finished it before he came, but then I moved and topsy-turvy and stuff. So it took me a long time to read. Had I not had the stomach virus and the need to move, I would have read it in 3 days probably. It's very entertaining, and this is probably the most important thing I want to say this whole time. So thank you, Stephen, for asking this question. My faith is strong enough not to be upset by this book. I think God is far more powerful than some guy who wrote a book. The fun thing about this book is that, hey, we get to have a discussion about it, and it's making us ask all these really exciting questions and interesting questions about who was Mary Magdalene, and what happened in the Crusades, and what was the Priory of Sion, and things I'd never heard of before. So I'm grateful for the book, that it's caused such a ruckus, and that we can have these great discussions, and maybe through these discussions, our faith is becoming stronger too. It is a good read.
Yeah, very good.
What did you think, Bill?
Yeah, I really would say the same. That Dan Brown is a brilliant author, and he's brilliant just because he's taken, all these theories that are out there. He's taken so many theories that where there is question about that. And what does a good author do? He works with that. There is a thing called literary license that is used that he has done and then said unabashedly that some certain things in here are true. And it's kind of like it leaves it up to the reader. You're going to have to figure out what that is and what's not. And here we are today doing just that. So it was a page turner for me. I loved it, and didn't like the movie as much. That'd be my thing. I didn't love the movie, but the book was incredible. So that's my opinion. There's a question in the back. We got a couple here, please. You're looking at me to comment on that.
You look all enthusiastic. I have something to say.
Say it.
All right. There is that theory that we're Christians now, and we want to get away from those fertility gods and all the little icons and all that kind of stuff. And if it is pagan, we want to do the opposite of what is pagan. But also, he's gone. We have the question over here about, were they really trying to cut women out of leadership in the church? A lot of people have said the Catholic Church has, even though they don't ordain women as priests and things like that, who's in all their paintings and who do they pray to? Well, the Virgin Mary. She's the Catholic woman, and so she has this hugely elevated place in their theology. So in a sense, Catholicism has done a lot to venerate women because they venerate Mary. And in the Greek Orthodox Church, too.
Question here. I haven't answered. I mean, the way I'd say that is that Jesus was a party man. That he was a guy who liked to have a good time. I mean, I'm being serious about this. He knew that one of the ways that we connect with God is in our in being in community, in eating together, in laughing together, in dancing together, in having a good time. And so there was a perfect opportunity where that was happening. It was a wedding. It was an occasion of joy and laughter and celebration. And that was a way to keep the party going. I mean, it sounds funny. Are you kidding? No, it really was. It was a way to keep the party going. And I've always looked at that miracle in itself as a miracle of transformation. It's a miracle of taking who we are and changing our nature into another nature. In fact, now I've read this, I have heard this, but I could never confirm it by finding the actual writing, that the early Christian symbol, one of the early Christian symbols, was not the cross so much as it was the transformation of water into wine, that was one of the early symbols that was used more. And I've loved that because I think that's what Jesus' message is so much more about. It is about our transformation from the beings that we are into this new creation in Christ, taking on the mind of Christ and all. So that has more meaning for me. I love that miracle for that reason. So it was his mother. That's right. It was his mother who asked him to do that. That's right. Hey, Jesus, we're out of wine. What do we do? Okay. And suddenly we have new wine.
I have a theory that's like 25 times less deep and inspiring than what you just said.
Okay.
But somebody I read, either Bruce Chilton or James Carroll in the Smithsonian article on the Da Vinci Code and on specifically Mary Magdalene, said that it's possible that was Mary Magdalene's wedding. And Jesus was such a good buddy of hers and her husband that he went to the wedding and was having a good time. And then something happened to the husband, and she was so racked with grief that she became mentally ill. So I thought, okay, that's a theory, but again, it's not written down. We have no idea.
Correct. It's speculation. I mean, and we can't. All we can do is just speculate and say, well, it could be, but we don't have any other writings, anything else that can confirm that. So we. Sure. Yeah. No, not at all. I never thought, not at all. I think that's one of his best miracles. Boy, I love that one a lot.
We had a wedding here not too long ago where some of the groomsmen brought a 24-pack of Bud Light and dumped it into the ice machine, and that was not a miracle. That was a big mess.
Oh my!
You can speak to the wedding coordinator about what a big mess that was, but anyway, we don't allow water to be changed into wine here in the church building. And don't contaminate the ice machine. Gee.
Okay, we're right.
How are we doing? We need to stop on that. Okay, so we've got 2 more weeks to go with this. One final quick question. Okay. When do we go? What? Oh, Mary Magdalene. Why did she move to France? Well, that would be a real stretch if you thought about, and somebody said this last week, that's pretty illogical to think that a single woman who may or may not have had money, she may have been just a beggar following Jesus around and eating, scraping up scraps when they fed the 5,000 and that kind of thing, that she would get in a boat and go all the way to France with no navigator. Was she rowing? I mean, was it a rudder thing? Was it one of those things with a big stick? I mean, it takes a lot of faith to believe that she would get there unharmed, surviving storms and attacks by marauding ships, pirates of the time, people who would say, ooh, here's a woman by herself. Let's rape her and kill her, It's highly unlikely that she made it to France by herself, but there are a lot of people who believe that she did, and there are a lot of people that believe that Her skull is preserved in a certain church whose name I can't remember right now, and that there is a morsel of her flesh that remained attached to the skull because that's where Jesus touched her one time. And you can go and you can see the skull and you can see the little piece of skin that's still attached. If you want to go see it, that's up to you. But I think it's highly unlikely that she ever made it to France. That's just an awful long way for that time period. Okay, until next week. Oh, sure. Why don't you pray us out since I talked so much today?
Puts it back on me, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Let's pray. Oh, gracious God, for all of these theories and different understandings that we've been wrestling with here, we actually give thanks for all of them because they help us to confirm our own faith in our own Bible and in the worship that we do here in our church. And we give thanks that we can talk about these things and be open with them and ask questions because that's how we learn. So for our teachers today, for all the questions that we've had, and for all the people who are here today learning, we give thanks for them. And until next time, in Christ's name, amen. Right.
Yeah, thank you for being here.